Polypede Works here, coming at you once again with the big 1100 of One Piece, entitled Thank You, Bonnie. Now, we got a lot of world building in this chapter. One very interesting thing is our cover request, who is by a Skywalker. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, if the request is by Noda Skywalker, that means it's technically Oda handing out secrets. With that being the case, it's very interesting that we see Usopp thinking about the boys back in Sura Village while a white rabbit is eating a carrot. And that white rabbit seems to just kind of come out of the blue. I don't know what that means. It's very interesting, though, that we've been talking about a white rabbit character who likes carrots, and it's very interesting that, based on the contents of this chapter, Bonnie doesn't like carrots. So this is all very interesting. I don't know what this means. I think we should stand by, but I will say I don't think the anime is detrimental to Carrot's chances. I think she still could be a stowaway, but we'll see. We'll see. We'll see. Moving on, though, we see Borsalino, and he's an admiral at this point. I always associate this fit with him being like in the vice admiral position, if I remember correctly, when he's chewing out Arlong back in the day with the whole Fisher Tiger thing. So that's wild that, yeah, he wore this fit as an admiral. And then we see X-Drake, a young X-Drake, which is interesting that now two supernovas once again are in the same vicinity as one another. And there is just a conversation between Kuma, Kizaru, and Vegapunk with Saturn about the stipulations of Bonnie being cured. So, everything we know about Kuma is basically a lie, because the stipulations are that he were to go to full remodeling surgery, be the face of the whole clone project, and Bonnie will not be freed from government custody until his memory is completely wiped. Which is crazy, but Kuma's fine with it because he didn't even think Bonnie could be cured, or Saturn would be a significant roadblock to Bonnie being cured. And then his only stipulation is that Bonnie be cured in the place where she grew up. The problem about this is that why is she on the run, presumably after the surgery is complete? What exactly happened? That's what I want to know. And it really does create some interesting problems for what we're going to talk about later concerning her age. But Kuma is just elated that the surgery is going to go through, but Vegapunk's terribly angry because all these things invade on Kuma's autonomy, which, okay, at least Vegapunk isn't outwardly a horrible person. I like that. It's just that he's ambitious and aloof, and he makes terrible, terrible decisions that are just bad and terrible, like cloning a psychopath. But anyway, we get some further information that it's going to take 6 months for the surgery to go through, in which Bonnie's going to stay at Egghead Island, and then another year for recovery, in which she will stay at Sorbet Kingdom in the church where she grew up at. This is also where we find out about Vegapunk's cloning ambitions, as he says he wishes someone was here to write everything down for him and also eat and defecate for him. So it's interesting that he's thinking about these things when Bonnie is in his custody. I will say that. That's a little alarming, seeing as how I think York is a gene experiment with some of Bonnie's DNA inside of her, which explains the voracious appetite. But I don't know. We'll have to see. He's such a great character. We see the surgery's going on. Then we see a funny little drawing that Bonnie does for Kuma, which is very sweet and very precious, and it's going to be important later. I love that Bonnie is using Sentamaru for piggyback rides, and I guess the liquid that we're seeing is green blood, or a prelude to green blood. Not sure on that, but it's interesting. Another very cool world building thing is that we see our first cargo ship, at least the first one I can recall in One Piece. It's called the Umit cargo ship. Don't know if that's a mistranslation, but in the Raws it says Umit, like Summit, but without the S, and it's arriving at Egghead. And I guess this is when they're starting to build up Egghead to what it looks like today. But it's still super early, which makes me question some things further. And now we have the big reveal. Well, a small reveal, but still a big reveal if you ask me. Now we know why Bonnie loves margarita pizza, or pizza margherita. It's because this was the last meal that she shared with her father when he was still a sentient, cognizant being. And it's wild that Kizaru is also joining in on the festivities and they all do the Nika dance. Kizaru, you're fired. How like that's weird. That's weird they show him doing this. I'm flabbergasted. Why is he doing the Nika pose? That's just interesting. Does he know? I don't know, because he seems to be the more educated one of all our admirals, even the new ones. So yeah, I don't know about that. But yeah, pizza marguerite is Bonnie's favorite food because this is the last meal she shared with her father. I also think the short that I made about the Nika parallels, meaning that the pizza is kind of like her own son, I think that still sticks. That may be like a double entendre sort of thing, but I think that still holds meaning. But it may not, but it was a good suggestion, I think. Moving on, though. Egghead Island still being built up. It's still very early, very early. The palm trees haven't even been installed yet. But yes, half a year later, 6 months pass, Bonnie is through her treatment, and then she's sent back to the Sorbet Kingdom to rest. And of course, this is the last time where we have Bonnie meeting Kuma, where she thanks her for being born. Now, we get a new character in this exchange. We get Bonnie's nurse, who is a Cypherpole 8 member, who is an intelligence agent named Alpha. I swore when spoilers are out, based on the leggings and the outfit, I thought this was one of Whitebeard's nurses from back in the day. But I looked it up. They kind of got like these leopard skin, like thigh-high boot things. So it's not one of them. And then one of them is actually named. Her name is like Tate or something like that. Tate. So Alpha is not Tate. I know that. The Cypherpole agents set up a facility in front of the church, which would be their accommodations during Bonnie's treatment. And Kuma bids Bonnie farewell in the custody of Grandma Connie and the rest of the geezers of the Sorbet Kingdom. We also find out in this chapter that Kuma's actual bounty is 296 million. So it's been 296 million flat. That's what it was before it was frozen, before he became a warlord. The warlord reactions are interesting because they kind of print lies about him in the paper, which is, I guess it makes sense as a propaganda machine. You don't want your shiny new sentinel of the world government to be seen as a pacifist. And we get a lot of interesting reactions. Sugar shows Dofi the paper. So yeah, Sugar being a character who is also age altered by her Della fruit makes a very interesting appearance in a flashback about a character whose age is in question. And Doflamingo likes the idea because he thinks Kuma is like him, which is very interesting that they give him that reaction because, of course, we know Kuma and Doflamingo were introduced at the same time. Crocodile doesn't care. He and Nico Robin are talking about it. He's more concerned about his rain-making ship, which is the ship from way back in 212. It's the crocodile motifed ship with the big cannon-looking thing for a mast. That's the one he's talking about. Mihawk doesn't have much of a reaction. I guess, I'm not sure if this is where he blows up Don Krieg's ship or one of his ships. I'm not sure. And then a very interesting appearance by Fat Alvida, which I love Alvida. Best girl, my favorite girl other than Sandra Sodia. Yes. And we see Kobe, and I think the other guy is Porche, the big dude with the blue and white striped outfit that Luffy punches in the anime when he bursts out of the barrel. I think he punches him too in the manga. I cannot remember, but his name is Porche. Then trouble starts. And this brings me to the point of my argument. We see Ace, we see Whitebeard, we see Jinbei, we see Marco, and we see Teach. Marshall D. Teach, otherwise known as Blackbeard. Another interesting thing to point out that I forgot is that when Alvida is talking about Kuma, she mentions Whitebeard in conversation. Now, before all these people started making videos about Kuma and Whitebeard being related, I'll put a notation here. I made a video about them being the same race. I was way off with the race name because I called them the Big Chin Tribe because they have similar chins. But it's interesting that he's being mentioned, and then Whitebeard appears shortly after with his boys. Now, another problem that I'm seeing is that Jinbei is talking directly to Teach. They're all having a conversation like they're bros. Okay, so with that being said, I think that one video that may call it the Rubber Conspiracy might be onto something because it's weird that this is being brought up here because he acted like he didn't know him. He acted like way back when the Time Skip first started, Jinbei acted as if he just knew him as being an acquaintance from Whitebeard's ship. But here, they're discussing the news like they're best buddies. I don't know, dog. It's strange. Now, I don't know how old Bonnie is at this point. I guess she's like 9 or something. And then after the year elapses, she'll be 10. But what's interesting here is that because Ace is depicted in this way with the shirt, he is 17 because designs matter. So we only see young Ace when he is 17 after he's joined the Whitebeard Pirates. When he has the shirt on, he's not like being a cowboy stripper. When he has the yellow shirt, he is 17. So this places things in a very odd spot because he dies when he is 20. So I wonder what that means for Bonnie, because I kept thinking about it in my head and it seems like she's not 12 in the present. She'd be either 14 or 15, because we also see Sabo, who would also be 17 as he's reacting to the news. And we also see Koala. Another very interesting point about Jinbei, though, getting back to that, is he equates Kuma to being like Dolphy because the paper prints him out to be a tyrant king, which is just interesting that Mr. Exposition, Mr. In the Know, doesn't know any further information about Kuma. And we know he never finds out because he has the same sentiment in the current timeline when he's talking to Bonnie about Kuma in Egghead, which is wild. So he never found out, rumors never spread. This is crazy. Hancock doesn't care. And here is where the Perona is Bonnie's sister idea kind of dies. I have another one, but we see Moria. His face is obscured, which is weird. I think that's because the scarring on his head might be significant, because that may be when he lost to Kaido. Not sure why they're covering that up, but he's lounging in bed and Perona's flying around as they're talking about Kuma. And Moria thinks that his power is stupid, which is very interesting because Thriller Bark is where the power is shown off. So that's very funny that he thinks it's stupid here. And then when he meets him in Thriller Bark, he knows all about his ability. So a lot of time has passed between when he becomes a warlord and when Kuma appears in the story, because that's a little tidbit of information that's very interesting. Because if you recall, Kuma starts his whole bit out with Moria as he meets with him, and Moria just says, "Shut up, I know how your ability works." Okay, so that's how he is interesting, because here he doesn't know anything about the paw fruit. He thinks it's a joke, but in the present he is very astutely aware of what it can do. So that's kind of interesting. It's also very interesting that Perona doesn't dismiss Kuma's abilities, as they are probably the reason why he became a warlord, which is very funny because she gets Paw Pad away first, if I recall. And yeah, like I said, the revolutionary dudes are reacting to it. We see Sabo, Koala, and Hack, and Dragon is very quiet, which, I mean, what could he do, Dragon? Things are sacrifices. Another interesting thing, since we're talking about the revolutionaries here, Saturn knows they exist, and he knows that Kuma was a part of them, which is just interesting to me. I know that's kind of like, of course he knows, but that's just an interesting tidbit that he's using that as leverage to pump Kuma up as this big sentinel for the world government. That's interesting. That's interesting. At first, I thought it was a act of just betrayal because he saw the world government was a more valuable option instead of the revolutionaries, but no, his autonomy and loyalty are being leveraged for the health of his daughter. So it makes sense. It does make sense. Then we get the best panel in the entire chapter. The baby drawing that Kuma's child drew for him of himself is his official Jolly Roger. I love this. This is fantastic. Kuma is a wholesome good boy. I love it a lot. It's also very interesting that the ship is just his hat, because the bottom of the ship is the same pattern that his hat has. You know, it's like polka dotted. And then the sides of his ship have the ears that he bears because the paw fruit. That is very funny. Kuma's ship is based. There's also a crucifix, a little tiny one way in the back. So yeah, man's a big priest. He's a big old priest. He never forgets his Nika religion. Very good. Very cool. And then we see him. He's sending notes to Bonnie as promised. and he arrives in the East Blue at Fuchsia Village. And we see a young Luffy who has just beaten up a tiger. So at this point, Luffy is by himself. I don't know how old he is. He's by himself, but his age is in question. The age of these characters is so weird to me because, okay, if Ace is 17, Dias at 20, subtract 3 years from that, Luffy is 14. So, that's perplexing. So I'm thinking, well, this time that's passed because things still need to happen. It seems as though when we meet Bonnie in the story, like at Shabuddy Archipelago, she's either 13 or 15, and then after the time skip, she's 17. Because the narrative that she's 10 in the pre-time skip and then 12 in the post-time skip just doesn't make sense to me, because it feels like there's so much more time that needs to be filled in, like her adventures at sea. Also, an interesting point about adventures at sea, throughout this entire chapter, she always mentions wanting to travel with her father, which is a very interesting point because, well, first of all, Kuma has the travel fruit. Very interesting. Also, the need for travel is always a good straw hat spotter. Didn't work with Jinbei, but Jinbei's weird, as we've discussed and how we'll discuss in the future. But everybody else has some involvement with travel. So Jinbei not having that involvement with travel is strange, but Bonnie being obsessed with travel and wanting to go places is very interesting because I don't think she accomplished all that during her pirate career. So we have to see how that pans out, but I think that's very favorable for her joining the crew. I can see that. I can see it. We need a dream to make it concrete, but I can jilt her joining. But the narrative that she's 10 or 12 just doesn't seem right to me with the timeline. But we'll see. We'll see. And with that, that is the end of our chapter. No break next week. This was a very monumentous chapter, even though it's more so world building as opposed to story things happening. But I like that we're constantly getting answers. That helps. Also, a very important thing is that we know now that Ace is responsible for killing the previous warlord who was in Kuma's spot. So at the time Kuma joins, there are 6. I wonder who is holding that spot, because the only shred of information I think we've ever had that there are warlords beyond the original set was in Film Z when Zephyr was defeated by a pirate. Then that pirate turned into a warlord, which is why Zephyr went rogue. So that's interesting. I wonder if we're ever going to get the full roster of warlords before the current one was established. And like, how long has the warlord system been in effect? Because it's this weird thing about the timeline here, because there could have been potentially 3 sets of warlords, including the current one. So that's just an interesting thought to think about. But with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching.